The day began with the soft, golden autumn light filtering through the maples on the street, illuminating the warm-toned leaves dancing on the damp asphalt of Vancouver. Akira, at 32, walked a few blocks from her home to the Tsubaki House, with the weight of her loyalty and purpose on her shoulders. She was the dedicated Shushimen whose absolute focus on her art was her main defense against financial drift. Arriving at the door of her small restaurant, with its cedar walls, she felt the urgency to start the day. As she reached out for the traditional sliding lock, her eyes fell to the floor. There was a red bill at the foot of the door, contrasting sharply with the polished cypress wood and the gray concrete floor. It was not a common mail envelope, it was a piece of intensely colored paper, folded perfectly in half, like an omen. The unexpected break in routine, right there on her workplace doorstep, sparked a sharp curiosity. Akira knelt down and picked up the note. It had no address or signature. Just a single phrase written in sumi, black ink, with elegant, but slightly hurried handwriting. The message was a whisper, an ambiguous promise: where there is beauty, there is risk. Wait for me with your best creation, for time is running out. The phrase struck Akira like a discordant but deliciously melancholic chord, like the season itself. Risk and beauty. Her heart, accustomed to the slow rhythm of the sherry, sushi rice, accelerated. Immediately, the note pulled her into an intense and recent memory, a flashback tinged with autumn romance, which she had tried to ignore for lack of certainty. She saw herself in the busy departure area of Vancouver International Airport. Rushing for an urgent fish delivery, she had collided violently with a tall man in a dark suit with a penetrating gaze. He was neither Canadian nor Japanese, but carried an aura of silent power and ruthless haste. He was holding a crumpled airline ticket and had an expression that seemed to bear the weight of high-level decisions. In the brief second their eyes met, she felt a magnetic attraction, a recognition of purpose that made no sense. He had apologized quickly in formal English and, with urgency, rushed to the gate, leaving behind only the impression of his intensity. Could it be him? Akira's mind raced. Wait for me with your best creation. Could it be a romantic invitation? An admiration for her art that was about to manifest? She allowed herself a fleeting smile, dreaming big, letting her loyalty to Tsubaki mingle with the idea of partnership in life. But, as quickly as it came, the dream shattered. The term risk reverberated, pulling her out of the warmth of romance. Akira, who dealt with high-value suppliers and overdue rent, the red envelope actually lay in the counter drawer, knew that a red note mentioning risk in Vancouver rarely meant love. It could be a disguised health inspector, a creditor, or something more dangerous, linked to the financial scarcity that made her vulnerable. The weight of her solitude and anxiety returned. She crumpled the note, feeling the terror and uncertainty of being a small business owner too focused to protect herself. Akira tucked the note into her apron pocket. The perfect sushi still needed to be made, but now, her art was tinged with a layer of fear. She opened the door of the Tsubaki House, ready to face the urgency of the day, knowing that her common world had just been invaded by something extremely dangerous and, perhaps, deeply personal. Akira spent the rest of the morning immersed in a forced calm. The red note in her pocket was an ember, subtly burning through her apron, but she resisted the drift by obsessively focusing on the quality of the fish cuts. The precision of her hocho knife was her anchor against the anxiety brought on by the mystery and the pressure of overdue rent. Lunch was slow, and the afternoon seemed to follow the same disappointing rhythm, confirming the threat of scarcity. Akira was beginning to convince herself that the note was just a cruel joke or a generic warning from some rival. However, around 5 in the afternoon, when the autumn light grew long and golden, the routine was broken. A luxury taxi pulled up outside Tsubaki House. Out stepped a man who was not the mysterious youth from the airport, but who carried the same aura of purpose and discreet power. The man wore an impeccable suit, had formal manners, and his gaze was one of silent evaluation. He was the opposite of most of Akira's clients, who came seeking casual comfort. The man sat alone at the counter and asked to speak with the Shushimen. Where there is beauty, there is risk, the man said to Akira, repeating the exact phrase from the red note, but with the neutral voice of a messenger. Akira's blood ran cold. The note was not a joke, it was the first move in a game she didn't understand. She felt that fear return, but her loyalty to Tsubaki and her focus on maintaining calm prevented her from reacting. "I am Akira," she replied, wiping her hands and forcing the composure she so prized. "What do you wish?" The man did not ask for the menu. He pulled out a sealed, dark, thick paper envelope. "My employer," he explained, "has been observing your art for some time. He admires your unquestionable dedication to tradition, a rare trait these days. He sent me to commission your best creation." The man slid the envelope across the counter. It contained a set of detailed and complex requirements, written in archaic and formal Japanese. It was not a simple sushi order, it was a technical challenge involving extremely rare ingredients, forgotten techniques, and a presentation that seemed stolen from an imperial ceremony. Inside the envelope, along with the requirements, was a photograph. It was not a common photo. It was a printed and enlarged image of the Tsubaki House facade, and superimposed on it, as if glued, was an open and validated Canadian immigration visa. The price for fulfilling the order was the certainty of her stability, the resolution of her rent debt, and the security of her stay in the country. The dish must be delivered tomorrow, at midnight, to an address that will be provided. If it is impeccable, all your financial and legal concerns will be resolved, the man said, without blinking. If you fail, your reputation will be destroyed, and the Tsubaki House will be permanently closed. The man stood up as quickly as he arrived, leaving the sealed envelope and the silence behind. Akira was paralyzed. That challenge was the direct materialization of the risk, a high-level test for her art in exchange for the certainty of her survival. That envelope held the key to the abundance and stability she longed for, but the penalty for failure was the total loss of her purpose. She knew that from that moment on, her life had changed. Akira remained motionless behind the cypress counter, the slippery dark paper envelope in her hands. The messenger had left only a minute ago, but the silence that settled in the Tsubaki House was heavier than a fire alarm. The reality of the challenge hit her, an impossible order, requiring the sacrifice of all her sleeping hours and the use of ingredients she didn't even know where to find in Vancouver, in exchange for the certainty of her permanence. She opened the envelope again, absorbing the shock of the demands. The sushi style was the oldest and purest idome, requiring mastery of techniques her sensei had considered too complex for her. The penalty, the immediate closure of the Tsubaki House, was a direct attack on her purpose and her loyalty to her art. As Akira tried to formulate a plan of action, her cook, a diligent young Canadian, entered through the back door, his face pale. "Akira-san, you won't believe it," he gasped, struggling to catch his breath. "The health inspector just left. He gave no advance warning. He said he received an anonymous tip about our facilities." Akira's heart tightened. Unannounced inspections were rare, and the timing was too cruel to be a coincidence. The anonymous tip was the first wave of the attack. "Did he find anything?" Akira asked, trying to sound calm, although her mind was racing. She was meticulous about hygiene, it was her defensive structure. "No," the cook replied, shaking his head. "He didn't find anything, of course. But the way he acted. He asked many questions about your fish suppliers, about air transport, about your licenses. He was planting uncertainty and doubt, not investigating failures." Akira closed her eyes. The risk was not just artistic, but now it was personal and coordinated. Someone, powerful and well-connected, was using the systemic fear of losing control of her business to pressure her into accepting the envelope challenge. The pressure of immigration and rent already put her in a vulnerable position, and now, they were attacking her structure of focus. She realized that the mysterious young man from the airport, who had awakened a fleeting dream of romance, was just a cruel distraction. The silent power behind the note was not seeking a date, it was seeking total submission. Akira felt the familiar pang of anxiety gnawing at her concentration, the opposite of her fixed point of certainty. She remembered the overdue rent in the drawer. If an inspector planted a single obstacle in her legal path, the debt would be the perfect excuse for the landlord to close the Tsubaki House. She was being cornered before she even started working on the order. She took a deep breath, trying to re-signify the attack. The pressure was immense, but the survival of the Tsubaki House depended on her loyalty to the work, not her reaction to fear. She needed to go after the rarest ingredients, and fast, but the fear of being monitored paralyzed her initiative. The attack had achieved its goal, diverting her from her purpose. Akira tried to contain the suffocating feeling. The attack by the anonymous health inspector had confirmed that her time was running out and that her movements were being monitored. She knew she needed to go immediately to the Richmond Fish Market, the only place in Vancouver that might have the exotic ingredients required by the note, but the fear of being seen and, consequently, reported, paralyzed her. The second attack came in a more treacherous and personal way, aiming directly at her loyalty and trust. Her cook, the young Canadian, returned from the pantry with an even tenser expression. He approached the sushi counter with a hesitation he had never shown before. "Akira-san," he began, his voice low. "I didn't want to say this, but there was a problem with yesterday's delivery. The sea urchin you ordered, the supplier called. They said they can no longer serve us. They said the contract was abruptly terminated by a priority client. The uni was no ordinary ingredient. It was one of the most expensive and sensitive, and the supplier in question was the main anchor of quality for the Tsubaki House. Losing that contact was a devastating financial and reputational blow, cementing the scarcity and making the execution of the envelope challenge immensely difficult. Akira felt the pain of betrayal. The cancellation was not a market accident. Someone, with great purchasing power, had intercepted the Tsubaki House supply chain. They didn't just want her to fail the challenge, they wanted her to despair, to lose focus and certainty in her own logistical structure. "They want me to fail before I even start," Akira whispered, the icy realization hitting her. The cook looked at the floor, unable to face her. I also received an anonymous email. They offered me double my salary to give information about your routine, about your suppliers. I deleted it. I swear, Akira-san, I am loyal to you." The cook's confession was the real punch. The threat was not just external, it infiltrated Akira's relationships of trust. She knew her cook was a good young man, but the money offered was a powerful temptation in Vancouver. The attack was designed to force Akira to distrust everyone around her, completely isolating her and compelling her to submission through paranoia. Akira, despite the deep pain, managed to maintain her composure. She looked at the cook not with judgment, but with gratitude for his honesty, reinforcing his loyalty with her calm. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said, her voice firm. "Now we know we are at war." The second attack had achieved its goal, it eliminated essential resources and tried to destroy Akira's trust. But, by confessing the offer, the cook gave Akira a crucial advantage, the certainty that she had an ally, however small, and the certainty that the mysterious challenge was not an artistic test, but a meticulously organized trap. She could no longer hesitate. Akira looked at the tablet in Kenji's hand. He was not the victor of the other story, he offered a structure for a solution, but at an unknown personal price. She needed the ingredients. She needed an ally. She was at a crossroads. Kenji noticed her hesitation. He lowered the tablet and took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them, and the subtle scent of his expensive cologne contrasted with the smell of fish and ice in the market. "Akira-san," he said, his voice almost a whisper, but charged with focus. "Your sushi is a manifestation of purity. I know that. But your art cannot survive operating in the fear of scarcity. You are legally and financially adrift. My help is the only way to ensure your stability against the power that is cornering you. And what do you gain from this? Akira questioned, clenching her hands into fists to maintain composure. No one with your power spends time with a Shushimen with debts without a huge return. Kenji allowed himself a brief smile, which softened the seriousness of his gray eyes. I gain the chance to see a structure of excellence thrive. And, yes, I gain your unquestionable attention. I saw you at the airport, amidst the chaos, and I saw that you have a purpose that transcends the trivial. I want to be connected to that purpose. The smile brought back the memory of the airport, of the intense gaze that promised something more than business, and Akira felt a momentary warmth of attraction, a romantic escape from reality. But the fear was stronger than the fantasy. His demand for her unquestionable attention sounded too much like the possession she feared. Akira realized the brutal irony. The man who caused her biggest problem was now the only one offering a viable logistical solution. She could no longer afford to focus on who he was, but only on what he represented. If I accept the tablet, Akira said, her voice tense, it is a strict loyalty agreement to my success. I will not divert my focus from my art. And I will not divert my focus from your certainty, Kenji replied, his voice returning to the formality of a contract. You need resources. I have resources. But every ingredient and every minute will be monitored. You must follow my logistical routes and use my contacts. It is a high-risk partnership that demands total trust. Akira hesitated for a moment, looking at the damp, empty hall of the wholesale market. Time was running out. Her survival was at stake. She reached out and took the tablet. The cold screen lit up, displaying the complex supply routes. The agreement is made, Akira declared, reaffirming her iron will. But make no mistake, Kenji Sato. My loyalty is to my art and the Tsubaki House, not to your influence. Kenji gave a small bow, respecting her defensive structure. May your best creation begin, Akira-san. Success is the only way out. He turned and quickly walked away, leaving Akira alone, now with the resources to fight, but with a partner whose true intention was a seductive and terrifying enigma. Akira returned to the Tsubaki House with Kenji's tablet and her hands full of ingredients she had secured through the complex logistics he provided. The adrenaline rush of breaking the supplier blockade, thanks to Kenji's influence, gave way to a suffocating sense of urgency. The crossing of the threshold was not just about accepting the challenge, but about allowing a powerful stranger to invade the structure of her purpose. She was in her kitchen, alone, surrounded by her hochos and cold countertops. The mysterious envelope lay open, with the immigration visa and the technical challenge visible. The fear of failing and losing Tsubaki was immense, but the fear of ceding control to Kenji was almost equal. The good thing was that Akira stopped focusing on Kenji's risks and focused on the greater purpose that had led her there. She remembered the absolute focus her sensei demanded and the dream of abundance she had for her restaurant. If she failed, it would be from a lack of iron will, not a lack of talent. Akira took the red note she had found at the door and tore it into small pieces, throwing them in the trash. It was a powerful act of resignification. She was destroying the symbol of fear and threat, focusing only on the artistic challenge. She picked up the long-cutting hocho, her most precious tool and the extension of her loyalty to her art, and cleaned it with almost ritualistic care. Feeling the weight and perfect balance of the blade in her hand, certainty returned. She was no longer running from scarcity or anxiety, she was advancing toward excellence. In that moment of deep concentration, Akira felt that the true choice was not between Kenji and the anonymous power. The choice was between the Akira who doubted and the Akira who created. She accessed Kenji's tablet and started the timer for the preparation of the dishes. With a sigh of acceptance, she opened her sensei's notebook, an old, worn volume, and began to decipher the forgotten techniques required by the challenge. Akira knew that by starting the timer, she was inviting danger into her kitchen. But she was also asserting that focus on her art was the only path to freedom. She had crossed the line from fear to resolute action. The crossing of the threshold was complete. The Tsubaki House had been transformed into a battlefield and a laboratory, and Akira was the sole warrior, armed only with her knife and her unquestionable will to create her best creation. Akira had started the timer, immersing herself in the complexity of the Idome challenge. The work table was full of diagrams of forgotten techniques and logistical requirements. She was alone in the Tsubaki House, the silence of the night broken only by the frantic rhythm of her own mind. However, Akira's solitude would not last long. As she deciphered an obscure method of curing tuna, the back door opened softly. It was Sayuri, her younger sister. Sayuri was a more practical and sunny soul, a digital artist who, unlike Akira, moved easily through the modern world of Vancouver. She was not a Shushimen, but she was the emotional anchor and the only person who understood Akira's unquestionable loyalty to her purpose. Sayuri found her hunched over the counter, the hocho next to a reverse engineering diagram for an ancestral smoking process. Sayuri immediately felt the weight and gravity of the situation. She didn't need words to know that the threat had become real. "Akira," Sayuri whispered, approaching cautiously. "What is going on?" "The cook called me. He said we lost the uni, and the rent is late." "And what is this map of high-security supplier routes on your screen?" Akira took a deep breath, trying to maintain calm so that her sister's anxiety wouldn't infect her. She knew she needed to be honest and loyal to Sayuri, but she also needed to protect her. "It's a challenge, Sayuri," Akira replied, showing her the envelope and the visa photograph. "A powerful client demands my best. If I fail, we lose the Tsubaki House. If I succeed, we will never again have to worry about scarcity or immigration." Sayuri looked at the visa and the technical requirements. She didn't question her sister's iron will, but she reacted with the logic Akira lacked. "You can't do this alone. You need sleep. And you need a plan for transportation. The rent and the visa are our chance for abundance and peace. If it's a war, we fight it together," Sayuri declared, assuming the role of strategist. Sayuri picked up her laptop. "I don't know how to cut fish like you, but I know how to protect the structure. You need absolute focus *** on the art. I will handle the rear guard." Sayuri took charge of the logistics. She would monitor Kenji's delivery routes on the tablet, ensuring they weren't ambushes. She would prepare coffee, light meals to keep Akira's body functioning, and create a silent alert system in the restaurant against any intrusion. Sayuri's support was the external anchor Akira didn't know she needed. The crossing of the threshold was no longer a solitary journey of sacrifice, but a partnership of purpose. With her sister taking the rear guard, Akira felt an immense weight lift. She could now dedicate herself entirely to her art. The certainty of having Sayuri on her team allowed Akira to finally turn to the counter with the total focus required by the sushi. The Tsubaki House kitchen, once a solitary laboratory, became a headquarters of loyalty and determination. Akira and Sayuri operated in the Tsubaki House under the cold light of the counter and the incessant pressure of Kenji's timer. The restaurant was closed, and the kitchen had been transformed into a high-pressure training ground. The initial tests came in 3 waves, designed to undermine Akira's focus and test the solidity of her loyalty to the challenge. The first test was the technical demand. The Idome style required the fish to be cured and aged under precise conditions, a process of time and patience that contrasted with the urgency of the deadline. Akira needed a specific type of clean beach sand for a salting process, which was not commercially available. She used Kenji's tablet to locate a remote bay, but the access road was blocked by a sudden, unannounced construction. They were under siege. Sayuri, acting as a strategist, took her bicycle and, under the cover of darkness, pedaled along alternative trails. She returned hours later, exhausted and covered in mud, but with the clean sand. The test demanded Sayuri's personal sacrifice, and Akira's loyalty to her art was strengthened by her sister's sacrifice. Akira realized that the pressure wasn't just to make her fail, but to make her give up trying for excellence. The second test was the violation of privacy. Kenji had promised resources, but he also delivered surveillance. While Akira was immersed in the difficult task of filleting Kasugo, young sea bream, without damaging the skin, a technique requiring absolute focus, Sayuri's laptop, which monitored the logistics, started blinking with messages. They were detailed data on the Tsubaki House's energy consumption, compared to closed restaurant standards, and a photo secretly taken of Sayuri's car license plate, dated from her night trip to the beach. The intention was clear: to force Akira into anxiety and paranoia, undermining her certainty. Sayuri glared at the photo in fury. "He wants us to give up," she whispered. "No," Akira replied, without looking up from her hocho. "He wants us to lose focus. He wants us to spend time on fear instead of spending it on the sushi. Fear is the drift." Akira felt the terror, but her purpose anchored her. She re-signified the surveillance. Kenji was investing heavily in her failure or success, and that increased the value of her art. She continued cutting, ignoring the invasion of her privacy. The third test was the romantic temptation. Around dawn, when the sushi required a critical rest in the cold chamber, Akira's phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, but Sayuri encouraged her to answer. It was time to understand Kenji's personal game. The voice on the other end was not cold, it was warm, deep, and familiar. It was Kenji Sato, the young man from the airport. He didn't talk about sushi or money, he talked about the beauty he had witnessed in her art and the solitude he felt. He invited her out, for a quick coffee, to discuss the urgency of time. The invitation was an emotional trap, trying to divert Akira from her purpose with the promise of love and partnership she longed for. Akira felt the warmth of romance and the betrayal of her own heart. She was at the limit of exhaustion, and the offer of comfort was almost irresistible. But she remembered her unquestionable loyalty to Tsubaki and her sensei. "I don't have time," Akira replied, her voice firm, although her body craved rest. "My only loyalty now is to my art. Time is only running out for your order. Not for me." She hung up. The test had been clear. Akira's absolute focus was the only thing Kenji couldn't buy or control. She had overcome the distraction, and the battle continued at the Tsubaki House counter. Akira's refusal of Kenji's invitation in the pre-dawn hours did not end the pressure, it only escalated it. The war was no longer about resources. It was a battle of wills and focus. The dawn brought the fourth and most technical of the initial tests, the pressure of time and body. Akira was deeply immersed in the nigiri assembly phase for the base of the best creation. The technique required the rice to be at a specific body temperature to blend perfectly with the fish fat. A precision of a few degrees was the difference between excellence and failure. Lack of sleep and the stress of surveillance made controlling her body temperature an impossible task, and her hands trembled slightly. Sayuri, monitoring the logistics on the laptop, noticed her sister's physical exhaustion. She tried to intervene, offering a break or coffee, but Akira refused, fearing that any loss of focus would cause her to miss the exact point of the rice temperature, a failure her sensei would consider unforgivable. The anxiety of failing artistically was becoming more intense than the fear of being reported. Kenji's message then came through a coded message. Not via cell phone, but via Sayuri's laptop, disguised as a supplier alert. It was a simple diagram of an ancient Japanese Zen teaching that her sensei often quoted: "If you master yourself, you master the universe." The diagram was not a threat, but a silent mentor. Kenji was showing her that failure would not come from the outside, but from her own internal drift caused by exhaustion. He was reminding her that the structure needed for success was her own calm and bodily control. Akira saw the message. Instead of getting angry at the invasion, she re-signified it as a high-level challenge. She realized she needed a radical act of self-control. She closed her eyes, pushed away the pressure, and remembered her purpose. She couldn't fight exhaustion, she had to work with it. In an act of loyalty to her own art, Akira turned off the Tsubaki House heating. The intense cold that invaded the kitchen was brutal, but it forced her body to focus on surviving the cold, diverting energy from anxiety. The cold grounded her hands and restored her focus. With steady hands, now colder, she worked the rice, using her intelligence to compensate for the room temperature and achieving the exact precision the Idome style required. The act of mastering the cold proved to Kenji that she was willing to sacrifice comfort for excellence. The test had been overcome by Akira's iron will. The success in mastering the cold gave Akira an injection of certainty she hadn't felt in months. She had proven to herself, and implicitly to Kenji, that her iron will was stronger than anxiety or financial scarcity. Now, the rhythm of preparation entered its most intense phase, where art and Kenji's strategy would meet. Akira, with Sayuri's help, completed the base of the required dishes, including the challenging idome. The Tsubaki House, although closed, pulsed with the energy of purpose. However, the final element was missing, the delivery. The envelope said, "Tomorrow, at midnight," but did not provide the final address, promising it would only be revealed at the critical moment. At 11:45 p.m., Sayuri's laptop lit up with an unencrypted alert, coming from a public traffic source in Vancouver. It wasn't a message, but a real-time transit route, with the final destination blinking in a remote industrial area near the port. The route was complex and full of detours that seemed designed to test time and patience. "It's a trap," Sayuri whispered, her voice tense. "He's sending us to a dark area, and the route is programmed to take exactly 15 minutes, with no margin for error. He wants to delay us, so we fail the midnight deadline." Akira, however, saw beyond the trap. She saw the high-level challenge. Kenji wasn't just testing their logistics, he was testing her focus under maximum pressure. He was forcing her into her zone of excellence, where the precision of minutes meant the difference between abundance and total failure. Akira, in a quick movement, grabbed her hocho and wrapped it in a cotton cloth. "We won't fight the trap, Sayuri. We will overcome it with our structure." Akira took the wheel of her utility vehicle. Sayuri was beside her, laptop in hand, acting as navigator. The wooden box containing the best creation was firmly secured in the back seat, protected by a thermal sheet. The race began. Akira drove with the same surgical precision with which she would handle her knife, anticipating traffic lights, cutting corners with loyalty to the delivery route. The street transformed into a racetrack of strategy and iron will. Mid-journey, Kenji's voice came through Sayuri's cell phone, invading the car. He was monitoring their speed. "Akira-san," his voice was calm, but with a touch of challenge. "You are 2 minutes ahead. Haste generates error. Where there is haste, there is distraction." Akira felt the anxiety rising, the instinct to accelerate and prove him wrong. But she remembered her purpose. Perfection is not haste, it is focus. She re-signified Kenji's pressure as a reminder to ground herself. She subtly pressed the brake, adjusting her speed to a calculated and constant rhythm. She knew the rhythm was not just about speed, it was about emotional control. She needed the sushi box to arrive intact and exactly on time. The final delivery was the test of trust. If she arrived at the exact time, it would prove that her structure was more powerful than fear and Kenji's control. Akira's car approached the port area, with the timer running. The meeting point was in sight, and the pressure was now almost unbearable. Akira's utility vehicle stopped abruptly at the door of a dark, isolated warehouse at the port, with the timer showing exactly 12 o'clock and 3 seconds. The 3-second failure, caused by Akira's pace adjustment, hung in the air. Anxiety hit Akira and Sayuri. "Akira, 3 seconds." Sayuri whispered, her voice tense as she closed the laptop. He will use that against us. The steel door of the warehouse opened. The internal light was not bright, but it revealed a long conference table in the center, illuminated by a single spotlight that looked like a stage. Sitting at the head, waiting, was Kenji Sato. Beside him was the formal messenger who had delivered the envelope. Kenji did not express anger at the slight delay. He merely looked at his wristwatch and then at Akira, with calculated certainty. 3 seconds, Akira-san, Kenji said, his voice calm, but with a touch of challenge. Your art demands precision, but your timing failed. The risk is that excellence is measured in milliseconds. Akira stepped out of the car, feeling the cold of the port and the pressure of judgment. She walked to the conference table and, with steady hands, placed the wooden box containing the sushi. She did not apologize for the delay. My art did not fail, Akira replied, looking him in the eyes with unquestionable loyalty to her work. The time was tight, but the creation is impeccable. The precision that matters is here. Kenji gestured to the formal messenger, who carefully opened the box. The light of the spotlight revealed Akira's best creation, an idome assembly that transcended cuisine, looking like a winter landscape over river stones. The cuts were surgical, the curing of the fish was evident, and the presentation exuded purpose and peace. Kenji stood up and walked to the table, pausing to admire the work. He did not touch the sushi. He looked at Akira's creation and then back at her. The beauty is undeniable, Akira-san, Kenji admitted, and there was a touch of sincere admiration in his voice that broke his antagonist facade. But iron will is the price your client demands. You have proven that you have the focus to fight against scarcity and fear. You are worthy of your hocho. Kenji turned to the messenger, who handed Akira a legally sealed document, the resolution of the rent debt and the approved residency visa. Overwhelming relief caused Akira's legs to tremble. The certainty of her survival was real. But the victory came with a personal price. Kenji dismissed the sushi. The art is yours, the reward is yours, he said. But now, I will give you the address of my client. He wishes to personally thank the artist who defeated him. He handed Akira a new note, this time, white and without threats. It was an invitation to a meeting, but not business. It was the address of a luxury penthouse overlooking the port, and the time was set for sunrise. Akira had proven her professional value and earned her survival, but now she was confronted with Kenji's personal temptation and romantic risk. She had crossed the line from war into the game of attraction with the man who had tormented her. The balance of the dish had been settled. Akira and Sayuri returned to the Tsubaki House with the victory documents, but the feeling of triumph was mixed with growing anxiety and uncertainty. Kenji's note, a direct and personal invitation for sunrise, represented a greater risk than any debt, the threat of being diverted from her purpose by an undeniable attraction. Sayuri, practical and suspicious, immediately took on the role of bodyguard. She analyzed the note with disapproval. Akira, this is a trap, not a date. He gave you the certainty of your survival and now demands your attention. It's a new kind of control. Akira tried to fight the attraction. Years of solitude and the glimpse of Kenji's charm and power tempted her, but she knew that giving in to emotion would make her lose focus. Her sensei always warned her, the weakness of the heart destroys the precision of the hand. The final test came when Akira decided she could not avoid the meeting. She needed to see the face of her antagonist to understand the game. She needed clarity to anchor herself again. She got dressed, wearing elegant, yet discreet, autumn clothes. She left the Tsubaki House under Sayuri's watchful eye, promising to maintain loyalty to her purpose. Arriving at the luxury penthouse overlooking the port, the atmosphere was one of abundance and power that made any other wealth seem insignificant. In the main room, with floor-to-ceiling glass panels, waiting for her, was Kenji Sato. He was not wearing a suit. He wore a simple kimono, and there was a steaming teapot ready for the tea ceremony. The setting was intimate, contrasting with the cold warehouse of their previous encounter. "Please sit, Akira-san," Kenji invited, with a wide, seductive smile she hadn't seen before. "Thank you for bringing beauty into my world. I am not the client, but I am your guardian." Akira sat down, maintaining a tense posture. "Where is the client? And why did you test and manipulate me?" Kenji served the tea with ritualistic precision, ignoring the questions. He began to talk about the solitude of power, about the unquestionable pressure of his family to maintain a legacy, and about how he had strayed from his personal purpose due to financial success. He wasn't just talking, he was opening up, revealing a vulnerability that mirrored her own. He confessed feeling attracted to her at the airport, seeing in her the loyalty and purity that were missing in his own world. He explained that the challenge trap was the only way he knew to prove that her iron will was real. Kenji reached his hand across the table, with a look of deep partnership. "I don't want to destroy you, Akira. I want you. I want you to join me. Together, we can have the certainty that you will never again have to worry about scarcity, and I will never again have to deal with solitude." Akira felt the temptation. The offer was for the love and security she had visualized for years. The peak of the test came when Kenji leaned in and kissed her with an intensity that promised to wipe out all her focus. The kiss was the trap of conquest, the most dangerous attack of all, as it targeted her emotional core. Akira pulled away, fighting to maintain calm and loyalty to her purpose. She realized that, however attractive the offer, she could not build a new world with someone who had subjected her to fear and a test. Her iron will demanded that she conquer this temptation before accepting any love. Akira felt the pressure of solitude and Kenji's attraction clash in an overwhelming emotional climax. She had rejected security and the promise of love, but the cost was immediate and painful. She abruptly stood up from the table. The weight of her decision was heavier than the hocho in her hands. Kenji looked at her, not with anger at the rejection, but with a deep, understanding sadness that reinforced his vulnerability and made her escape even harder. "I understand," Kenji said, his voice low. "You cannot trust someone who tested you. But I am the only one who saw your loyalty and iron will. You are choosing solitude and scarcity again, Akira-san." Akira did not respond with words. She walked to the edge of the penthouse, looking out at the port under the cold light of dawn. She was back to her anchor, but the ocean looked bigger and scarier. The emotional climax came with the acceptance of her reality. She had proven her artistic excellence and secured the stability of the Tsubaki House. However, she realized that in her search for purpose and focus, she had isolated herself from any possibility of partnership or love. She had defeated Kenji's trap, but the price was solitary perfection. Akira turned to Kenji, her eyes filled with brutal honesty. "I am not returning to scarcity," Akira replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I re-signified your manipulation into a test of focus. But you taught me that I am incapable of accepting help or vulnerability. My purpose is the Tsubaki House, and there is no room for the uncertainty of a high-risk relationship." She picked up the financial and immigration stability documents that were on the table, the trophies of her victory. Kenji stood up, walked over to her, and instead of attempting one last kiss, he gave a formal bow, acknowledging her structure and her will. "I will always be loyal to your excellence, Akira-san. But the world is complex. Remember, the biggest obstacle to abundance is the resistance to receiving," Kenji said. It was his farewell and his final lesson. Akira left the penthouse under the rising sun. She had the certainty that the Tsubaki House was safe, but she carried the wrenching pain of renunciation. She had avoided the snare, but in doing so, she had condemned herself to bear the structure of perfection alone. That dawn marked the end of the war and the beginning of her assured solitude. Akira, driven by the iron will to be happy, did not act immediately. She had accepted Sayuri's advice in Kenji's lesson on resistance to receiving, but her loyalty to her own purpose demanded total clarity before surrendering to any vulnerability. She remained at the Tsubaki House, dedicating the day to research. Sayuri, using Kenji's routes and the supplier contacts he had left on the tablet, dug deep into the strategist's life. Kenji's structure was complex, and the discoveries revealed a personal uncertainty that contrasted with his professional power. First, they discovered Kenji's personal difficulty. He wasn't just a businessman, he had been engaged to an influential Japanese socialite, but the engagement was abruptly broken off. The reason was not financial, but personal. Kenji had imposed a rigid structure on his relationships, treating them as high-level transactions that should benefit the family legacy, never allowing vulnerability and emotional chaos. His ex-fiancée had left him, calling him a man who treats love like a spreadsheet. Akira realized that Kenji's solitude was self-imposed, and he saw her as the only woman strong enough to break his own rules. Next came the most urgent discovery, which imposed a countdown. Sayuri managed to access Kenji's corporate travel agenda. The sake restructuring project in Vancouver was only a temporary stop. Kenji was about to take an irreversible path. "Akira, look at this," Sayuri whispered, her voice tense, showing the laptop. "In 3 months, he has a flight back to Tokyo. But it's not a simple return. The flight is linked to a final family succession meeting." The return meant the definitive cut of his ties with Vancouver and total commitment to the cold, traditional structures of his family in Japan. The Vancouver project, the abundance he had offered, would be handed over to an associate, and Kenji would never return to the Tsubaki House if there wasn't an undeniable reason to stay. Akira felt the urgency invade her zone of focus. Time was, indeed, running out, but now there was a 3-month window to prove to Kenji that love was not a spreadsheet, but the only structure that mattered. Her loyalty to her own happiness demanded an immediate move to prevent him from taking that path of assured solitude. Time was running out, but Akira had still not made her final move. She knew that Kenji's iron will needed to be broken by a shock of authenticity at the exact moment. The meeting happened, by chance of fate, at a prestigious rare sake auction, held in an exuberant historic Japanese garden on the outskirts of Vancouver. The place was of stunning beauty, silent waterfalls, red torii gates, and stone lanterns, all under the filtered light of a cold autumn morning. It was the perfect backdrop for Kenji's tradition and money. Akira was there for a very different and much simpler reason. The Tsubaki House had secured a small, specialized catering contract for the event. She was personally delivering a small box of ashizushi, pressed sushi, a requirement of one of the oldest and most revered sake masters. It was her new purpose, detached from Kenji. She was walking through a bamboo corridor, with the sushi box balanced with precision, when she saw him. Kenji Sato was not in the auction room, amidst the big businessmen. He was at the edge of a koi pond, dressed in his dark, formal suit, but in a relaxed and atypical posture. He was holding a notebook and talking to an elderly, wrinkled gardener about pruning azaleas. He wasn't there for business, he was there for a personal, occasional matter that reflected his loyalty to art and detail. Akira stopped. The urgency of the 3-month countdown hit her hard. She realized that this was the moment. She approached, and the sound of her shoes on the gravel made Kenji turn. The surprise in his eyes was genuine. "Akira-san," he said, his voice choked. "I came to deliver the order, Kenji-san," Akira replied, holding the box steady. "The Tsubaki House always fulfills its commitments, even if my biggest sake supplier is about to abandon me." Kenji's gaze darkened. He knew she wasn't talking about business. She was talking about his imminent departure for Tokyo. "You know my structure requires me in Tokyo in 3 months. It is the certainty of a family legacy I cannot ignore," Kenji stated, appealing to the logic she understood. Akira placed the sushi box on the edge of the pond. The act of setting down her art with such calm and purpose was, in itself, a declaration. You tested me to prove my iron will, Akira countered, looking at him with honesty and vulnerability. You proved to me that love is a spreadsheet for you, and that solitude is the price you are willing to pay for a cold legacy. She moved closer to him. I discovered your personal difficulty ***. You treat love as an asset because you are afraid of emotional chaos. You are running from the uncertainty of real life to a certainty that will imprison you. I forgive your manipulation, Kenji Sato. Kenji closed his hand over hers, sealing the touch. The warmth of his certainty in the Japanese garden was overwhelming, but the moment he declared that the flight to Tokyo could wait, a new and subtle layer of anxiety arose between them, something not yet verbalized. The time moved on a few weeks. The Tsubaki House was saved and prospering under Kenji's financial management, who, surprisingly, was discreet in his influence. The new uni supply was the best in Vancouver, and the restaurant was full every night, fulfilling Akira's dream of abundance. Akira, however, could not completely anchor herself. She was married to her culinary purpose, but the partner had brought with him a universe of unresolved uncertainty. Kenji was present in Vancouver, working in his penthouse overlooking the port, but his iron will was visibly divided. He spent long hours on silent, formal calls in Japanese, and Akira knew he was managing the consequences of his decision. He had rejected the family legacy and still hadn't communicated the extent of his deviation. The reaction of his family, the Tokyo bomb, was an invisible threat hanging over Kenji's head, something he was trying to protect Akira from. Akira, in turn, confronted her own resistance to receiving. She had accepted abundance and stability, but Kenji's world was not about dollars, but about responsibility and scale. One night, Kenji took her to dinner at the penthouse, ignoring the Tsubaki House for the first time. He presented her with a necklace of perfectly round pearls, symbolizing her purity. "Akira, you are the most unique woman I have ever met," Kenji said, his voice tense despite the words of admiration. "The elegance and delicacy with which you apply precision to your art showed me the path of certainty I had lost. I chose to stay for this truth you embody. But my family does not understand loyalty to art on a small scale. They understand the structure of an empire. They will demand that you assume the responsibilities of my wife, which means co-leading my luxury food division, designing new restaurants, and expanding the Tsubaki House globally. I still don't know how to re-signify this choice for them without you losing your absolute focus on cooking only with your hands." Akira accepted the necklace, but felt a chill. She realized that the price of the high-level partnership was not giving up wealth, but sacrificing the intimacy of art. Abundance meant she would no longer be just a Shushimen at her counter, but the leader of a culinary empire, having to delegate the focus of her hands to the focus of her strategic mind. The new conflict was there, a silent dilemma about purpose expansion. Kenji didn't know how to be free without losing his legacy. Akira didn't know how to have love and global abundance without giving up her business. They still needed to decide which structure of life would be sacrificed so that love and ambition could truly anchor. Akira returned to the Tsubaki House, leaving Kenji in the penthouse for his crucial call with Tokyo. She could no longer fight time or fear. Her loyalty was now to the certainty that she had offered the perfect solution. All that remained was waiting, the final test of her iron will. The solitude in the Tsubaki House was different now. It was not empty, but full of expectation. Akira did not clean, she cooked. She dedicated her hands to the creation of the most special sushi of her life, a dish that was the synthesis of her art and her journey, the final contract. She molded a unique nigiri, using only the purest ingredients, polished kashihikari rice and a cut of chutoro with a marble beauty that mirrored Kenji's complexity. She made it not for a client, but for the man who had taught her that purpose needed to be expansive. Perfection was her gift and her promise. The wait lasted more than 3 hours. As the faint light of the Vancouver dawn began to tinge the sky, the door of the Tsubaki House opened softly. Kenji Sato walked in. He was not in a suit, he was dressed casually, but there was an unshakable peace and a deep warmth in his gaze that Akira had never seen before. He looked like he had shed the weight of a continent from his shoulders. The family structure has been notified, Kenji said, his voice full of exhaustion and emotion. They hated it. They fought. But they couldn't deny the market structure of your proposal. The luxury food division is ours, Akira-san. We won. The climax was not the financial success, but what he would do with it. Kenji walked toward Akira, stopping on the other side of the cypress counter, the same place that had been the battlefield of his structure and loyalty. Akira picked up the final nijiri, the final contract, and placed it on the counter, sliding it toward Kenji. Success is yours, Akira said, her voice firm and full of honesty. But I want to know the real purpose of this. The loyalty of my heart demands that you be vulnerable. You tested me and manipulated me. You accept the emotional chaos and uncertainty of love, or do you return to the safety of solitude? Kenji picked up the nijiri and looked at the work of art. He looked at Akira, at the sushi that symbolized the dedication of a lifetime. Akira, I love you, Kenji finally said, his voice full of gratitude and surrender. I don't want solitude. I am the man who treats love like a spreadsheet because I was afraid of loss. But your burning desire, your iron will, taught me that the biggest risk is not living with purpose and joy. I choose uncertainty with you. I choose partnership. He took the nijiri with his fingers and, instead of eating it, carefully placed it back on the counter. He held out his hands, inviting her to cross over. Akira, with the certainty that her solitary perfection was over, circled the counter. She approached Kenji. He did not kiss her immediately. He first held her face with his hands, looking at her as if he were seeing her soul. The kiss that followed, under the faint light of dawn, was not rushed or forced. It was the final proof that loyalty to her own truth had manifested abundance and love. The Tsubaki House was saved, and the future was theirs. 3:00 3 years later, abundance consolidated. 3 years passed. The small Tsubaki House in Vancouver had become the Tsubaki Group, a high-level Japanese culinary boutique network, with branches in Vancouver, New York, and Kyoto, under the artistic direction of Akira Sato. The touch of her loyalty and purity of purpose was in every detail, from the cut of the fish to the calligraphy of the menus. The Sato residence in Tokyo, once formal and untouchable, was now full of warmth and joy. The presence of Akira, her structure, and her elegant simplicity, had softened the environment. The family, who once judged her, was delighted with their granddaughter, Hana, meaning flower/hope in Japanese. Akira no longer stayed alone behind a counter. She spent her time teaching the structure of sushi to her executive chefs, ensuring the replication of excellence without sacrificing her autonomy. She was the master of scale, and her focus was now the preservation of tradition on a global scale. Kenji had integrated Akira's purpose into his own. He was a transformed man, more relaxed and happy, having re-signified the family legacy not as a burden of control, but as a platform for art and abundance. He was still a businessman of iron will, but now he used his certainty to nurture his wife's joy. The final scene takes place in Tokyo. Akira and Kenji are in the courtyard of their residence, where the koi pond is now surrounded by new Japanese vegetable gardens cultivated by Akira, showing the touch of her loyalty to the land. Cradled in her arms is their daughter, Hana. Akira looks at Kenji and smiles, the joy in her eyes, this time, not feigned. Akira, with a deep peace, I love you, Kenji. You gave me the abundance without stealing my purpose. The risk was worth it. Kenji, with a certainty that was pure love, watching his daughter. Where there is beauty, there will always be risk, Akira-san. But together, we created the only structure that matters, the one of our loyalty and joy. He kisses her, the final act of partnership in their new and unshakable world.